So you've probably heard about this. It's called the sniff test, where we put our hand towards the dog so they can smell our hand to see how the dog is. Well, think of it logically. There's only two things that can happen here. One is that the dog says, "Hey, I like you," and then you're buddies forever and there's no problem. Or, the flip side, you get bitten. And so why offer the dog a target? You know, that's the question. So it's not something that we want to really be doing. Now, I looked up on the internet to see if this thing is still suggested, and it is. One site suggested, well, rather than giving your hand, use your fist, and that way if the dog does bite, it doesn't get your fingers. It still gets your hand, so it's not something that we want to do. And the other thing that I'm always worried about is kids. And that is if you've got a kid going, putting their hand tentatively forward, and if the dog just makes a little bit of an exaggerated move or something like that, and the kid goes like this, that's an invitation for the dog to follow it and bite. So no, we don't want to do that. So the sniff test, as we call it, is not something you want to do. And so how do you do it? What do you do when you're faced with another dog? Well, keep your hands in your pockets. And that's probably the best thing to do. Don't give the dog something to look at, to go after. And that is the best way to do it anyway. And the way I always think about it is, the dog should be allowed to touch you before you touch them. And that is, let the dog decide if you are a friend to him or her or not. And the key with that is that when you are meeting another dog, just keep your hands safe, let the dog approach, and between you and the owner, watch the body language. If the dog's sort of coming up and sort of looking, sniffing, and the tail's wagging, great. That means we probably can get along, and then the next thing you're going to be doing is giving the dog a hug and rolling on the ground with them. But it's the dogs that don't do that we're concerned about. If they sort of come up and give a quick sniff and then go away, but they seem to be relaxed and everything's good, fine. And I'll tell you what the next step with that in a second. But if the dog comes up and you see the hackles go up, and as the hair goes up on the back of their neck, down their back, they just look a little bit tense, and that is, oh, I'm kind of worried about this guy. That isn't the dog that we want to allow them to keep sniffing us. The owner should be pulling them away and saying, okay, not today, we're not in the mood. And maybe that dog will never be in a mood, but that's another topic. So the key is watch the dog and see what's happening. And once you've established that the dog is friendly and just wants to say hi, great. Then you can put your hands down, you can let them sniff around you, and then the next thing is you may want to pet them. And people have an obsession about petting dogs. It's just the way we are. So the thing you don't want to do is to raise your hand up, go over top of the head and start petting them on the head. That's, as we call it, a dominant move. It just makes dogs uncomfortable. And think about it with people, it makes people uncomfortable. If someone were to come along to me and start patting me on the head or something like that, towering over me, I don't feel good, okay? And most people don't. So don't do that to a dog. The way you want to do it with a dog is to put your hand down and go down underneath, just stroke the side, go underneath the chest, underneath the chin. And if that's accepted, the dog sort of snuggles in and says, hey, I want more of this, then you can go for it. So that gives you an idea on what you should do with dogs. Do not offer your hand as a target, waiting for the dog to decide, do I bite this one or not? Just be very careful what you're doing, and make sure your kids do the same thing. Offering the hand, like I say, it can only go one of two ways. You don't get bitten, you do get bit. And so we want to avoid that completely. So please do that and drop the sniff test from your repertoire.